excellent.
30 years ago, I was only a kid, but I can still remember it like it was yesterday. 7 weeks before the 1994 Olympic Winter Games, Olympic skater Nancy Kerrigan was hit in the knee by this mystery assailant with a baseball bat. Not something that you anticipate hearing in the Olympic Winter Games. Authorities soon determined that the Olympic skating rival Tonya Harding was actually involved and that her ex-husband was the hired attacker. I mean, absolute craziness. In one moment, Tonya Harding had literally destroyed what it took a lifetime to build. Now, see, in the 90s, this was a huge pop culture moment that everyone talked about, and it's even referenced still today. Have you ever wondered how people who've worked so hard can just blow it all with one decision? See, it might be an actor or a business leader or a politician, a friend of yours, or possibly even yourself. My question is, why do we sabotage ourselves? Today, we're going to dive into this very question and discover some of the common ways and reasons that we sabotage ourselves and how we can overcome it. Welcome to the Mind Your Business podcast, the podcast for whatever business is on your mind. Let's get started.
Well, that's excellent.
Well, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Mind Your Business podcast. As always, if this brings value to your life, will you do me a favor? Will you like, subscribe, share this with others, or leave a review? Because I always want to add as much value to as many people as possible. Well, it's now known that Tonya Harding had grown up with an absent father and an abusive mother. And then at age 19, she would enter into an abusive marriage. And when you dig beneath the surface of her rise and fall as a successful skater, you can see that the deep damage that she experienced as a child was really still impacting her adult life. And although it may not play out on television or on a grand stage, many of us are also sabotaging our own selves for reasons that are also probably buried beneath the surface. Have you ever noticed in your own life that possibly every time the relationship starts to get serious, you find a reason to end it? Or every time there's an opportunity for the promotion, you talk yourself out of pursuing it because you think that, well, there's probably someone more qualified than me. Or whenever there's a risk to be taken, you play it safe. This is self-sabotage. You see, saboteurs start out as sort of this coping mechanism to help you survive the things you've experienced, or even the imagined threats that we've developed in our own psychological and emotional survival skills. See, we do this, many of us, as a child in order to survive. But then by the time you're an adult, you don't need them anymore. But they're now living rent-free in your head, and unfortunately, they're not very shy about speaking up and speaking their mind. And for many of us, like Tonya Harding, our saboteurs are often rooted in fear or anger, regret, possibly shame or guilt, or this obligation, this negative self-talk that you bring to yourself. And research shows that only 20% of people actually achieve anything close to their true potential because of their saboteurs. And this is why it's incredibly important for every one of us that we discover what they are and then how we can deal with them. Well, there are actually a total of 9 saboteurs. And so today we're going to identify how many of these are trying to sabotage your life and then what it will look like for us to overcome it, and a process in which we all can. So let me give you these 9, and I want you to take personal inventory of your own life as you watch or listen and try to determine if you're dealing with one or possibly many of these in your own life. And here's number 1 is the victim. The first self-saboteur that we talk about is that you are always the victim. Someone with a victim's voice in their head believes that they are a victim of the negative actions of everyone else, even when the evidence shows otherwise. Now, this mindset can make you believe that your problems are always the fault of everyone else. So if you find yourself always blaming everyone else, even for your own actions, even if there's no evidence to support your case, there's a good chance that you're struggling with this. So here's a good question to ask yourself to see if this actually applies to you. Do I use this mindset as a way to gain the attention and the affection of others. So if you find yourself always playing the victim so that you can gain attention or gain affection from other people, maybe this is a struggle for you. Number 2 is the people pleaser. The people pleaser. How many people do you know that are people pleasers? I know so many people that struggle with this. So if you try to gain acceptance and affection by either helping people, pleasing people, rescuing people, or flattering other people, maybe you struggle with this. So a good question is, do you prioritize the desires, approval, maybe the comfort of other people over your own needs, even when it's harmful to your own well-being? And if you say yes to that, you may struggle as a people pleaser. People pleasers are driven by this strong desire to be liked and to be accepted. And although those are good things, to be liked and to be accepted, the problem is that this can cause you to avoid conflict or anything that may resemble rejection in your life. And although the motivation to experience the most positive relationships by avoiding conflict is good, well, ultimately you suffer the inability to share your true feelings. So ultimately, to please everyone else, even when it's a detriment to yourself, you begin trapping yourself in this negativity in your life by simply trying to please everyone that is around you. Number 3, here's another one that I'll give you, is the avoider. The avoider. Now, this is simple or similar to a people pleaser. Avoiders run from uncomfortable experience rather than facing them directly. So we run from anything that would cause us confrontation or discomfort in our life. We would just rather run from it than face it head on. Now, this may provide just a little bit of short-term relief, but ultimately it causes long-term complications in your personal and in your professional relationships. So if you find yourself always running from a difficult situation or a difficult environment, maybe difficult people, or even difficult tasks that you've been assigned, it's quite possible that you are avoiding. So you're an avoider if you're always looking for the out. So I would ask you today, what is on your plate? What have you been given? What have you been assigned? What personalities or people are in your life that you're just trying to avoid, trying to ignore or pretend that they don't exist so that you can just stay in a place where there is no tension? That causes you to be an avoider, and it will sabotage your life. Number 4, here's another one, the stickler. The stickler. Has anyone ever told you that you're being a stickler? Or maybe you've heard someone say that about someone else, that they're being a stickler about something. This is a term that I've heard my entire life. See, being a stickler refers to a person who just insists on strict adherence to rules, standards, or traditions, and often it's to the degree that just seems overly excessive and inflexible to other people. Now, see, this is a rigid way of thinking. And because of this rigid way of thinking, this rigid stance, being a stickler on everything, it just creates tension and frustration in relationships because there's this need for this perfectionism, and it just becomes way too overwhelming for other people. And then you can often just miss the big picture simply because you're holding too tightly to the tiniest of details. Now, we all know that details matter, and it's important to strive for excellence and do it the best way that you can. But when the tiniest of details becomes so much bigger than the big idea or the overarching mission or goal that you're trying to achieve together, then it becomes a detriment to yourself and to everyone around you. It begins to sabotage all that you are doing. So if you find yourself with people and they're telling you, loosen up, it's going to be okay, it's not that big of a deal, chances are you're being a stickler about something and it's creating frustration and tension in the relationships that are around you. Number 5, the next one that I'll give you is restless. Restless. Do you find yourself constantly in search of a greater excitement or the next big thing, or you just have this constant need for busyness? It's quite possible that you suffer with restlessness. See, being restless can sabotage your life because even though you're sowing lots of seeds, you don't stick around long enough to see the harvest. So ultimately, you're just always standing in a new but unproductive field. See, some of us believe that the grass is always greener on the other side. There's a better adventure waiting on the other side. So we have to have something new. We get it in the moment, we're excited about it, it's shiny, but it doesn't last, and then we have to move on. Now, I think this is common for many of us. I really do. I think we often get bored or we get frustrated or we're challenged by something and we need to grow, so we simply move on to something new. However, I believe personally that the lasting success is really built over time, and that takes time overcoming this restless saboteur in your life. So, here's my challenge to you. Take inventory. Are you sowing lots of seeds? Are you working really hard? Are you constantly overwhelmed or possibly burnt out, or you're bored or you're frustrated, but you're not seeing the harvest of all that you're planting? It may just be possible that you're sowing a seed and then you're so quickly moving on to the next thing that you're never watching it grow. The next one that I'll give you, number 6, is the controller. The controller. The controller feels a need to take charge and be in control. You want to control situations and you want to control people. This control makes you feel as though you can better direct your desired outcome. In other words, I can do it better. I can do it myself. If I were in charge of this, we would already have made this much progress. We would have already had done this. The problem is that most things are actually out of our control. And as a controller, when you can't control something, it creates this high anxiety and stress in your life. When a controller can't control, there's anxiety, there's stress, there's worry, there's burnout. So if you find that you don't do well even in team environments, or that you're always at odds with those who are in authority over you, it's a good indication that it may be that you struggle with control. So if you can't take orders, if you can't collaborate with people, if you can't listen to other people's ideas, or if you can't consider other people's feelings in a process of something, and all you're worried about is controlling, it's going to sabotage your professional and your personal relationships. The next one, number 7, is the hyper achiever. The hyper achiever. Do you find worth in who you are or what you do? This is one of the most enlightening and powerful questions that you can ask yourself. Do you find your self-worth in who you are or in what you do? See, the hyperachiever is dependent on constant performance and achievement for their self-respect and their self-validation. Because of this, you're always going to be chasing the next achievement, and you're never going to be fulfilled. And this makes failure even more devastating for you, because you're always chasing achievement. Whenever you find that you faced failure, you're never fulfilled. And this becomes devastating, crippling to you. I was actually speaking with someone recently who's in a high level of authority about their upcoming retirement. After decades in their role, I just asked them this question because I was so curious. I wanted to know if they were worried about life after retirement. And the response that I received was, I will be fine because my job is what I do. It's not who I am. Think about that response. I'm going to be fine. Even though I won't be this anymore, I'm fine because my job is something that I do. It does not define who I am. See, this is a really healthy outlook. But if you find your identity in what you do, you may struggle with being a hyperachiever. So I want you to ask yourself that question today. Is my identity wrapped up in who I am or what I do? And that's an indication if you're struggling with this area of self-sabotage. Number 8, I'll give you the next one, is the hyper-rational. The hyper-rational. You really wanted to start that new project, or you wanted to take a risk for something new, but instead you rely excessively on logic, on reason, factual analysis, and then you miss out on that leap of faith. And although logic and reason and factual analysis are all important, if you overanalyze, you over-rationalize everything, it will cripple you and you'll never take a leap of faith. So if you find yourself overthinking to the point of taking zero action, this may in fact be your self-saboteur. And then the last one, number 9, is the hyper-vigilant. The hyper-vigilant. Have you ever noticed that the fear in your life can never rest? Do you worry constantly? Do you always try to predict what's going to happen? and then plan your response to that so that you can avoid any unknowns in your life. If you're always struggling with fear and unrest, and you're constantly worrying, and you're constantly trying to program this safety zone, this landing pad for everything that's going to go wrong, maybe you're hyper vigilant. See, fear is paralyzing, and there's a good chance that you've self-sabotaged yourself with fear. And when you self-sabotage yourself with fear, you are paralyzed and you cannot move. Now, I realize that in all of these that we discover, it can be really difficult to uncover these things about ourselves. But the good news is that it can be so empowering if we embrace the weaknesses that we have and then we leverage it for strength. And I want to just lift a little bit of the load off of your shoulders, is that the truth is we all struggle with either one or many of these, but they can make us better. So what I want to do is I want to give you 3 simple ways to turn these into strengths. I don't want to just identify it. I don't want to just say, well, this is going to hold us back forever, but I want to take a moment and I want to go to how do we take these weaknesses and how do we actually turn them into strengths? Well, these are 3 steps, 3 simple things that you can do to begin today in growing in your weaknesses. Number 1, I would tell you to do it with grace. Give yourself grace. Cultivate a mindset of self-compassion and understanding. Just take some of that pressure off of yourself and understand we are all experiencing some of these same struggles. Because we self-sabotage and we get in our brain and it begins speaking to us, we can think we're the only ones. And when we think that we have all of these inadequacies, we think that we're not capable of getting that promotion. We're not capable of achieving our dreams, doing these things that we have always desired to do. But giving yourself grace, it just means recognizing and accepting your imperfections and your mistakes without judging yourself so harshly. Give yourself some grace. You got to allow yourself to process emotions, and you have to do it without feeling guilty. When we process some of these things, we shovel so much guilt on ourselves that we begin to bury all the potential in our life. So process all of your emotions without guilt, and then understand that personal growth is a journey. And although every one of our journeys may be a little bit different, we all experience the same ups and downs along the way. So my encouragement is today, just stop to consider the effort that you're making. Think about all the work that you're putting in. Celebrate even the smallest victories, the things that we would just look over and not even stop to recognize that we did that we accomplished it. Stop and celebrate the smallest victories in your life. Forgive yourself when things don't go as planned. This is actually giving yourself grace. So why is this important? It's important because it takes grace to grow. You're trying to reprogram a process of thinking and feeling, ultimately living, think about it, that has been formed since childhood. It doesn't happen overnight. Many of these things that are living here, they've been developed since you were a child. It doesn't happen overnight, but with grace, I promise you, you can get there from here. The second thing in this process I would tell you to do is to do it with grit. Do it with grit. I love the word grit. To me, grit just means rolling up your sleeves, working hard, and even getting a little bit dirty. It just means that you've just got this tenacity that you're going to go after it and you're not going to take no for an answer. There's an acronym for grit that I love that I think is fitting here. Growth, resilience, initiative, and tenacity. If you're going to have growth, it's going to take you resilience, it's going to take some initiative on your part, and it's going to take some tenacity. You will never grow and you'll never gain ground in your life if you aren't willing to face yourself and overcoming your weaknesses with a little bit of grit. After all, the goal is growth, but it's going to take resilience, it's going to take initiative, and it's going to take tenacity. Resilience, you just don't give up. Initiative, get up today and say, I'm going to be better at this. I'm going to be better at being me today. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to put in the grit. You got the tenacity to attack it. So allow yourself to question the validity of the saboteurs in your life. Ask yourself, when these thoughts are happening, when they're coming through your brain, ask yourself, are these thoughts based on facts or are they based on assumptions? One of the biggest obstacles that most of us face is overcoming our own personal weakness. We often give in, we give up when it becomes challenging, but ultimately when we're challenging ourselves. So just get some grit. After all, it's much easier when we're in this challenge, with thinking about ourselves and thinking about what have I done wrong and how am I going to overcome this? Surely we just want to forget about it, or we project it on other people. It's easier to project it and blame other people, right? But instead, don't do that. Just take inventory. Make a list of all the saboteurs and the ones that are challenging you. Admit that they've robbed you of opportunities, and then with just a little bit of grit, call them out. Make a commitment to overcoming these areas in your life, and I promise you, you can do it. And then number 3, the last of this that I'll give you, is do it with guidance. And I think this is important as well, to do it with guidance. You have to clothe yourself in grace, equip yourself with grit, and then gather those around you who can help you to grow. See, in order to be better, you need guidance from other people. Surround yourself with a supportive network of colleagues or mentors, coaches, or anyone that you have that you can trust who will provide a perspective of yourself that you don't have, who will offer guidance, and who will give you some encouragement along the way. Now, in order to do this, you have to be transparent and you have to share your challenges with them. You have to ask for feedback and ask them to help you see if they agree with the saboteurs that you've identified, or maybe if they see something different. And then ask for guidance, but give permission for them to have a role in challenging you in these areas. Giving permission is crucial because you're empowering that person to have a voice and authority in your life over these areas. You have to be challenged in order for us to grow. Now, most of us are actually tempted to hide these weaknesses, but the reality is that everyone around us, they can already see them. We tell ourselves that we can fix them on our own, but in reality, we're just going to continue missing these opportunities because we weren't able to correct it alone. You need guidance. Now, I want to see you succeed in every area of your life. I want your relationships to grow personally and professionally. I want you to get the promotion. I want you to start that project that your passion has been calling you to. I want to see you live your life on purpose. So today, that's why we're pulling back the curtain on these saboteurs that are trying to rob us from the growth that we have. Now, I even encourage you to go back, watch or listen to this again. Identify some of the saboteurs that are in your life that are bothering you, that are always in your mind telling you that you can't or that you won't or that you never will. And then start today by taking these very simple action steps. Now, if you lead an organization, you may find these 9 saboteurs are present in your team. And I would love to help you strengthen your team in this specific area. You can use the link below in the show notes to schedule a free 15-minute personal consultation with me, or you can just reach out, see how I can add value to you and your organization. And I want to encourage you to share your thoughts across all of my social media platforms so we can keep this conversation going, so we can learn from each other. And as always, if this adds any value to you, please take a moment, subscribe, share, like, leave a review. This just helps make sure that we can reach as many people as possible. So thanks again for being a part of the Mind Your Business podcast, the podcast for whatever business is on your mind. So go, grow, share this with other people, and let's go make a difference in bringing meaning back to the marketplace. We'll see you next time.